Hi, my name is Michael Chikeen. The smartest people I've met have one common belief, that us silly humans really don't know much. For example, we still don't know why planes stay in the air, or how Tylenol or even gravity works. Yeah, gravity. Look it up. In today's distracted, clickbait, misinformation age, I wish we could all be less certain, more humble, and a lot more curious. Admittedly, I've been known to struggle with all three. So no more, no less, this show is my attempt to be that change. Thanks for joining me, and here we go. Hi everyone, welcome back to No More, No Less. My name is Michael Chikeen, I'm your host, and today with us we have Andreas Kambanis. He's the illustrious owner of Nibble Apps. You might know Nibble Apps from such of your famous food and drink apps in the App Store, like Fitmen Cook and Meal Prep Pro. Nibble Apps has held some of the top spots in the food and drink category in the App Store for several years now, and he might be helping you plan your meals. So Andreas, thanks for being here and welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks so much, Mike.
I guess I wanted to just dive in about your story, because you and I kind of follow a similar path with the I guess the soul of the 4-hour work week, in which, you know, we've kind of decided that having one of the more typical jobs wasn't really in our life path or something that we wanted to commit to. And so I don't think we've ever really talked about this. So I'd love to hear like your journey from uni into what eventually led you to creating these cool apps.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think a lot of it kind of comes down to chance, I think. But essentially, I was living in London at the time, and I started bike commuting into work. And, I was looking for various information for sort of cyclists like myself that are just kind of getting into it and want to know, okay, well, what bike lock do I buy? Like, how do I stay safe on my bike? What's some good bike routes I could follow in London? That kind of thing. And at the time, blogging was a big thing. And so I just started this blog basically talking about all these different things that were coming up as I was kind of starting to cycle more and more in London. This is the early days of earlier days of the internet. So like you could kind of just write a blog post and you're on the first page of Google. So,
what year was this?
This is going back. How old was I at the time? I would have been like during university, basically. So I must have been 19 at the time. So I'm 35 now. So, so was that close to 20 years ago, just under?
I don't do public math. Sorry, no public math.
Let's call it 15 years. It just kind of took off from there because it just started getting traffic and comments, and I was kind of reading these how to do a business blogs and websites and stuff, and right. One of them I think was, there was this idea of, you should ask your audience what they want, basically. And so I created an email, and then a ton of people, I'd say a ton of people, like a couple of thousand people signed up. And I had this survey in there that was kind of like, hey, I'm thinking of doing either like a bike maintenance guide or an ebook with cycling routes, and I kind of asked like what would be most valuable, and from there I just started turning it into more of a business. So when I finally finished university and moved back to London, I was able to get full-time into running my own, running that as a full-time business. So that was like the London Cyclist blog. And then flash forward, I joined this entrepreneur group that we're both in that I don't know if we're allowed to name, but so secretive.
Is it still secretive or no?
I don't know.
I think because the name was originally a little unsavory.
Yeah.
But now it's I think we say it's called the Frontier Group now, and it's mainly like a group of male entrepreneurs, and you and I had been led there by the guy who started it, and then we met on a trip.
Exactly. Yeah. So through that group, I met somebody that had a really big paleo blog called Civilized Caveman, and we teamed up and we created an app called Caveman Feast. Because
Good name.
Yeah, Caveman Feast. And so, so then suddenly I was kind of in the app world, basically, kind of by chance. And it's interesting because I think I always pictured doing my own thing. I never really sort of sat down and strategized about exactly what it would be. It kind of just happened completely by chance. And I don't know if it's like the influence of your who you see around you. Like certainly my dad always ran his own business and he was always really stressed out running his own business. And I was like, that would be awesome. I'd love to be, I'd love to be really stressed out all the time. Like my dad is.
When I'm older, I would like to have too many things to think about and not enough time to do these things. That sounds like the goal.
I'd love to wake up at 7 a.m. and think about work.
Right after I fell asleep thinking about it.
So yeah, I really admired my dad taking phone calls while we were on family holidays on the beach. I was like, one day that'll be me.
Best case scenario. Scenario.
Yeah. So so it was kind of by chance, basically. But no, I mean, there's stressful days and there's chill days. Certainly when the business first started, it was a lot more chill. I remember, more or less, we were launching one of the apps while we were on a coach in driving through Peru, kind of thing. So there was times when it was a lot more like 4-hour work week-esque. Nowadays, it's kind of a lot more of a real business in a sense.
Well, it's funny. Before I go back to some questions on how you were able to make that connection for that first project, I wonder if you said you remember launching some of these things while you're on a trip, but I wonder if that is like a bit of pathological for you. Because I remember you and I were on a fun trip in Italy, and you were going through the big launch for I think Fit Man Cook, and you and I were having lunch with my family, and you were like going off for some phone calls, and you could like see you're visibly like nervous that this thing was happening, and I think like those nerves are what enabled you to eat more food than any of us at that table. And we were like, when you out eat a group of Italians, like there's respect for your lifetime there.
Yeah, I've learned when an Italian grandma offers you more money, that's an opportunity that you shouldn't really turn down. It's only going to happen so many times in your life. So.
More food, I think. You just said more money.
More food. Did I say more money? More food. If she offers you more food, then you definitely want to say yes.
But so I was going to say, like someone that was non-technical, as I think it's fair to classify you as, like doing those blogs or whatnot. I think if it was on WordPress or any blogger site, the technology would be completely different than I think if you were building an app at that point. I mean, if that you and I met in 2012, and 2012, and then I think you built that first app not too long after, and so I don't know that the apps, like the iPhone had just launched 5 years prior. I don't think the App Store was even like that big of a thing quite yet. It was getting there. So how did you decide to do this project, to approach this person? What was the catalyst that started you down this road, that you weren't really equipped for at the time?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So at the time it was, so I remember it was the iPhone. I think the iPhone first came out and it didn't have an app store. It was completely different to what we have now. It took a couple of iterations. I think it was until the iPhone 3GS, I think maybe before we got the first app store.
Right.
I think, as with a lot of these things, there's kind of a gold rush in the beginning when these new platforms are taking off. If you're one of the first people on TikTok or one of the first people on Instagram, you can really benefit from those kind of early days where there isn't that much content to go around, and you're kind of like, it's a lot easier to be noticed. So we really sort of capitalized on being early on the App Store. But how it came together was, so it was in that, so I was running the bike blog, and I was actually approached to, I was running the bike blog, and we decided that, okay, we want to do a bike maintenance product, something that helps people maintain their bike. And the more I thought about it, the more I thought, well, this would be an amazing thing to have on your phone with you as you're going around. And, this is very early days. There's probably only 10,000 apps in the App Store at the time. So it's very, very early days. And I was like, yeah, but this would make perfect sense on this new iPhone thing that's just come out. So I reached out to a couple of developers, and we ended up building this app called Bike Doctor that would teach you how to maintain your bike. And so that was kind of my first entry into the App Store. So the journey was basically, I had this bike blog. I had an audience that was interested in what I was writing about through the bike blog. I asked them what stuff would make their lives better, essentially. And one of the product ideas that came out of that was the bike maintenance guide. So that was really the first app that we launched. And then I got into this entrepreneur group as well. I was interviewed about what I was doing with the bike blog from the founder of this entrepreneur group, the Frontier Club. And through that, I went to one of their meetups, which was in Canada. And there I met the person that we ended up doing the Caveman Feast app with. So the reason that kind of connection happened there was I'd already created one app with Bike Doctor, and it made a lot of sense in my head that, well, of course, if you've got bike maintenance, step-by-step bike maintenance instructions, it's not really all that different to have step-by-step cooking instructions. So I approached him, Abel, at the time was who was running the website. And I approached him and said, you should really turn your blog, the recipes you have on your blog, into an app. I've seen some success with what I've been doing with Bike Doctor. And he was kind of interested, and he said to me that he was like, yeah, I'd love to do that, but I'm too busy at the moment. How about we team up and do it together? So I was like, okay, great. So, suddenly I was running an app company. So that's what I mean by it kind of happened by chance. But I guess it goes to show there's a lot of value in, in sort of the kind of connections that you make. And it's amazing how one connection can lead to another, which I guess is what we'll talk about a little bit later on in the podcast.
Right. Yeah, because I think it's a big thing to emphasize how important it is to just go and do something. Like the amazing thing is, like, once you have something that you're creating, that you're birthing into this world, so to speak, is that like you'll meet so many other people along the way just trying to solve your own problems, like to find a developer, to decide how do I make these recipes, how do I explain how to fix your bike or whatever. And then, like you said, like the force multiplier is that when you're joining a like-minded group of entrepreneurs or et cetera, people that are on their own journey, and then most entrepreneurs I know are happy to help other entrepreneurs. So I didn't know, I totally forgot about Bike Doctor. And so like finding developers and getting that up and running, was that a big challenge, like that learning curve? Because I don't believe you graduated in comp sci. There was nothing, like you really just kind of picked this up from scratch and just kind of like learned along the way. Is that accurate?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So it kind of, it was really, I didn't have any expertise. I had done a little bit of programming at university, but absolutely nothing to the level that would have been needed to create an app. And so, it was by chance, actually. It was somebody that contacted me through the bike blog that they'd created an app, and they were asking me if I could promote it through the bike blog. And I said, of course, happy to help you out. And I said, oh, by the way, are you interested in taking on any freelance projects? Because I had this idea for this app called Bike Doctor. And so, again, it was kind of by chance, but I guess sort of, like you say, sometimes it's just about pursuing those interests and sort of seeing where it will take you. And that's how we ended up there. But absolutely not. I didn't have any expertise in like running an app company or marketing or hiring or anything like that. It was all from scratch. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's really great. What did you find to be the hardest transition when you were going through and building these apps? Like, what was the hardest skill to build? Because now I think you've been doing Meal Prep Pro and the Fitman Cook app for quite a period of time, and I know you've had several updates that have been really successful and all these things. But what has been the hardest part to learn?
Yeah, for sure. And I feel like when you're talking about your your journey starting out with this stuff, I feel like this is normally the point where someone goes, anyway, so I had this idea and then I went to my dad and he gave me $500,000.
And it fixed everything.
Sadly, that did not happen.
Your dad's not taking your calls now.
Yeah.
He's on the beach and he's like, no, I'm done with this business stuff. Forget it.
So what's the hardest thing? I guess it was just kind of constantly sort of evolving as things are changing. I think that the interesting thing has always been, I think I entered business with this naive thought that what I was doing would like scale on top, like one thing would kind of scale on top of the other, and it would be an unlimited like linear progression upwards, basically. Right. Like the chart goes up. Yeah. So, with the bike blog, I always thought to myself, okay, I've written, say, 1,000 blog posts, and I'm making $2,000 a month. Hey, when I have, 2,000 blog posts, I'm going to be making twice that, so I think you started out with that quite naive view. And I think it's similar way with the apps. There was this quite naive view that was kind of like, okay, cool. We've got one app that works. Like, let's just go out there and just team up with loads of recipe writers and just create loads and loads of apps. But obviously, while you're busy creating the other one, your original app, the sales are starting to go down. So it's this kind of difficulty in how do you keep scaling something when, the bottom of it basically keeps coming down. So yeah, it's quite an interesting challenge. I think that's what sort of, and that was the initial idea was, okay, let's just go team up with 100 different recipe writers and create 100 different recipe apps. But in reality, like most of them were just not interested in doing a recipe app. They're like, who the hell is this person that's emailing me about doing a recipe app? I'm not interested.
That's interesting. Yeah, I think over time, that's one thread between your and my personality that I find super funny, is that like, we'll look at an idea or think of an idea and be like, yeah, this should be pretty easy. This is a great idea. This is fantastic. And right away you find out, one, it's a bad idea. Or someone has already done it and there's no point of you doing it. Or the third isn't like, oh yeah, it is a good idea, but this is going to be really hard. Because they say like most entrepreneurs probably wouldn't have started if they knew how hard it would be. And I don't know, there's something in our makeup that perhaps turns off that, part of that risk factor that is like, no, this should be fine. And I know it's fun, but like we always hit that wall at one point where you're like, okay, now I've got to like dig a little deeper to solve these solutions and move forward.
Yeah, you're frequently in uncharted waters, aren't you?
Right.
And I think that the growth requires not just like to figure out some new tactic in the business that's going to make a difference, but sometimes there's also a lot of like personal growth that has to come into it. Because like especially when you hit a bit of a, say, plateau in the business, and it's like and that's stuck for a little while, that really requires a big evolution in your thinking, where you have to kind of start being like, okay, stick at it, don't be hard on yourself. Like, it's a real sort of all these different stages that you have. You have this amazing kind of new idea, and it requires a lot of hustle because you just really don't know what you're doing, and there's a lot of figuring out. And then each stage kind of requires both personal growth and then, just the general, the business itself just has to evolve so much as well. But yeah, it keeps things interesting.
Well, that I'm considering launching this like small project for like mental health for entrepreneurs. And on in that vein, how, like, what can you share with entrepreneurs for how you deal with the mental health aspect when you're always in these uncharted waters and you have like this sticking point, this blockage that comes up, and you realize like, okay, everything that's got me to here likely will not take me further. Like, how do you personally deal with those scenarios?
Yeah, for sure. I think the one thing that I have been very consistent with in the past couple of years is I'll just absolutely prioritize exercise and sports and stuff like that. And I think that that's made a big, big difference, because there's some times in, during lockdown, etc., where we'd be really stressed out, and then, you just go and play like a paddle game, or you go to the gym or something like that. It makes a huge, huge difference. And I think that there was kind of just a mindset shift a couple of years ago, where I was kind of like, it's so easy to say like, oh, I'm too busy, I'm too stressed, I can't hit the gym today, or I can't go for play sports, or I can't go for a run, or whatever it is. And at some point there was kind of a mindset shift where I was like, no, like, this is a non-negotiable thing for me. Like, this is something that doesn't matter how busy it gets, how stressful it gets, I'm always going to go and do that, because it just, it just helps clear your mind. It helps get you into a better headspace. It's so important for the mindset. So I think that's making that shift, so that's become non-negotiable, has really helped as times have got tougher. Like at the start of the pandemic, we had to scale back the business a bit, let somebody from the team go. These are very like challenging things to go through when you're running a business.
Yeah.
But yeah, that definitely helped me a lot. And absolutely, like, having other people to talk to was the other huge thing, and I think that it's an interesting thing, because I think when your business is doing well and you're doing great, like, everybody wants to talk to you. Everybody wants to kind of like, tell me how you're doing great, and I think it's just a natural human thing. It's like, you kind of just want to hear about your friends succeeding. You want to like feel good about them. You want to be like,
right,
support them and stuff like that. But when things are going tough, you start to shut off a little bit, I think, from some of your connections, because you're like, well, I don't want to be judged as a non-successful entrepreneur, or somebody that doesn't have a growing business. And so you end up kind of, through your networks, you only end up hearing about the people that are doing well. And then you don't hear that many stories about the people that are like, look, to be honest with you, it's kind of sucks at the moment, and then we're going through a hard time, and we're struggling to grow things, and we've had to do X, Y, Z, and so on.
Right.
And so it's always quite refreshing. Like, I went to a friend's wedding recently. It was kind of refreshing to talk to another entrepreneur who was like, yeah, we just bought all these sunglasses. We have this huge stock of sunglasses, and we can't sell it, and I don't really know what I'm going to do and stuff. And you're kind of like, okay, it's good to hear from that range of stories. It's like, not everybody's crushing it every single day,
Right.
But I think that, I think trying to push yourself to kind of open up to friends that, especially friends that are doing similar things and doing similar challenging things and have been through these times themselves. I think it's very challenging to kind of open yourself up and show a little bit of that vulnerability that, do you know what, like, stuff kind of sucks right now. It's not going great.
Right.
And I guess at that point you'll find out like who's a really good friend and who's kind of just sticking around for the good times.
Sure. And I wonder in that if there's a lot to be said that there's like a masculine component to this, like shame identity, where like, if we're not doing well, we can't share. I'd be curious if in like female only entrepreneurship groups, if they're more willing to share a lot of their losses or their struggles, because in my experience, like, men in general seem to compare more often and compete, and to be in this environment that like they want to know where they stand, stratified in this in their groups that they're in. So, I'm sure you and I have both met people that will grandize what they're doing and big up, increase their numbers and all these things. And like you said, like when you even talk to them in these groups, it becomes like an Instagram reel of what their business is like, where meanwhile, like, if things are crumbling, like, that's the time that we need to learn to reach out and to, like, like Brene Brown says, like the shame, it only exists in darkness, where if you can say to people like, yeah, I'm really struggling here. Like I don't know what to do. Like this is the first business I've started or whatever the case may be. And in my experience, if you can be vulnerable, like people are always happy to help because most entrepreneurs, like we said, like they're all struggling. And I don't mean that as a perpetual state of being, but like you're always solving a different problem. So you know that like sometimes they're great and sometimes are kind of shit, and they're always willing to lend a hand. So it's great that you've also been able to foster those sorts of connections, because I wonder what happens to people that don't.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and it's still like an ongoing thing, and I would absolutely say that I probably only share that with maybe a handful of the friends that I have. I think that beyond a certain number of kind of the closest friends, I think I'd still be pretty embarrassed to say, hey, it's actually not going great at the minute, and so on. I'd rather be more vague. So it is still an ongoing thing, but I think you're right that it's something that a lot of people experience. And I think you're right to say as well that everybody's solving challenges all the time, so it's kind of everybody's got some sort of challenge that they're trying to overcome.
Right.
But I think we're just naturally we want to put across the best version of ourselves, I guess, to others. We want to sort of show, let me share the 5 things that are going great with you. I'll be quiet about the 5 things that are not going so great. And I think the worst that we see of this is like you say, is people that will sort of hugely inflate their numbers. And I think sometimes that'll get you. It's hard because sometimes that'll get you so far in life. You see people kind of get so far because they kind of bullshit their way to it, basically.
Sure.
But at some point, what's the phrase? Like the emperor has no clothes. It's like, at some point you get revealed for being a bit of a fraud, and then it's a huge downfall from there. So it's not a kind of wise path to follow, basically.
Yeah. And I wonder how many people feel that imposter syndrome all the time, in which like even they're doing well, but if they're in a group environment where everyone around them has businesses that are like X amount larger, then they feel like, well, should I even be here? And so that leads them to be like, well, maybe I'm the imposter, that I don't want to be found out to have no clothes. It's a delicate balance when you start like entering these different groups. Like I think I heard a long time ago that it's always good to be in the middle of that pack, where like you can help people beneath you, and it can keep you humble and helping, but also have people above you that you can learn from, so everyone kind of has these new ideas, but no one kind of feels like out of place. Yeah, for sure. And I think the other thing is the other thing that has worked really well for me is the gratitude journaling. It sounds so basic, it sounds so basic to say like, workouts, gratitude journaling, but it really has worked. Just writing 3 things at the start of the day I'm grateful for, and I'm supposed to do it in the evening as well, but I think 90% of the time I'll just do it in the morning. But it's still it's still really, really helpful. It's just something about it kind of reframes your mind a bit, and it sort of reminds you that there's there's stuff outside of work as well. If you can't, if you're you can't get this kind of satisfaction from work because it's challenging, and targets are not being hit, deadlines are being missed, etc., etc. It kind of reminds you like, but there's this like whole other life of work, and sometimes it's very easy for work to kind of just like grab hold of you and drag you in, basically. So it sounds basic, but it works. I've started doing even so like those gratitudes in the morning, not every morning, but when I remember. And like I have a specific this little notebook here, and basically like I will just do like it's like 2 entries. You can't even see what it's like, but 2 entries per page. And after the things I'm grateful for, I'll do a positive experience from the day before, and then I started adding 2 positive experiences in general from my life. And so I have to sit down and I have to be like, okay, well, I'm going to pick, let's see, grade 4, like, you know what I mean? Like, and then I start going into uni, and then every day I just have, like, it starts coding my brain to remember all the great stuff that I've done. And it kind of sets me up for, I don't know where I read that, but it's been pretty helpful.
So positive experiences as in
Literally anything. So like I'll do the gratitudes, and then one positive experience from the day before, and that part is from like the science of happiness somewhere. But I started adding 2 positive experiences from any time in my life. So I just sit down and I just think like, what are 2 experiences that brought me joy? It could be anything. It could be with the previous partner, with my family, with my friends, like anything. And I don't know what it is, but like always, like after a week of doing that, like there's something that kind of shifts. I really can't explain it.
Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah. The other one I was starting to experiment with is, what's the most interesting thing that happened today, or that you heard today, or that, it's kind of an interesting one.
Right.
But the idea is, humans, I guess, are storytellers. And so by sort of consciously being like, oh yeah, that was really interesting, I'll write it down. And then it kind of becomes part of the stories you tell, I suppose. But that's an interesting one. But I only just, I think I heard about that through James Clear's newsletter. I don't know if you're on that one.
Okay. No, I'm not. The Atomic Habits guy, right?
Yeah. He's the habits guy.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That's cool. Yeah, I guess so. To springboard from that, like one of the great stuff that entrepreneurship has enabled you to do is for you and your partner to travel and move around, and that's something that you're embracing even through university. Like you and I, for example, met on one of these trips, and so now you're in Lisbon. I know I've lived there before. I'm in Spain right now, and like I think we just before that we should touch on like what it's like to live in these like countries outside of our origin country. I'm from outside Toronto. You're from Birmingham, I believe, and lived in London as well. So like how has it been, I guess, for you emigrating to a new place like Lisbon, and how have you found it so far?
Yeah, for sure. So it's definitely, a big change, right? And I think that, certain things are enough that they kind of grate on people that they leave. But I think, coming from the UK, certainly where you have, Amazon next day delivery, and pretty much any product you want can be on your doorstep within a couple of hours. I mean, I know a friend of mine that was like, oh, it's raining, and he ordered an umbrella off Amazon, and it was there within 2 hours because he was
way.
Yeah. So you're going from that to like Portugal, which is like, oh yeah, like you order this thing and it might come next week or it might come the week after, and you don't know if it's going to be raining in 2 weeks' time.
Wow, I wonder if there's like like 2 parallel lines that is tracking like the convenience afforded to humanity and societal collapse.
Yeah.
Like they have to be step in step right now.
So that's like, so that's one of the first things you kind of adjust to. Is you're like, like you got to get used to stuff taking a bit longer. And I think that's, but I think, I mean, I've only got positive things to say about Portugal, really. It's like a super chill place. There's like sunshine all the time, basically. You've got a nice mix of mountains, but also the sea. You've got, everything's walkable. You don't have to be in your car all day driving places. It's a lot more affordable than other places, although I know that's kind of changing. So there's like a ton of positives with Portugal. I think where you start running into difficulties is when you want to get something done.
Classic.
So I think, we bought a house here and renovated it, and we just, I think that the kind of prime example that I have is we wanted to put in some wood floors, basically. And we contacted this company in Portugal that's like the only supplier in the country that does these floors. And they were like, oh yeah, that'll take, 3 months. So we were like, okay, great. So then a month later, we went back to them and we're like, okay, cool. We're ready to order those floors now. And they're like, oh, that'll take 5 months.
Oh.
And so you're like, oh, okay. And so then I kind of just, for my own interest, I kind of wanted to compare it. And so so I called up a company in Spain and I was like, yeah, we want these floors. Like, how long will it take? And they were like 3 weeks. So I was like, okay, 3 months in Portugal, 3 weeks in Spain. And I was like, just for my own interest, I'm going to call the supplier in the UK for these floors and ask them. And I was like, yeah, these floors. And they're like, yeah, 2-3 days.
Really? So like they could ship it to you and get it ready, or what?
No, so I just pretended that I was like living in Spain or living in the UK just to get a quote and a time frame.
And you couldn't get it ordered from Spain to Portugal?
No, because they were like, oh, that's the supplier for that country, so I don't want to step on their toes.
Oh,
yeah.
So secretly, you'd have to rent a van, meet them at the border, and do this big deal of flooring in the back of some desert.
I'm not saying that that's exactly what we did.
I cannot confirm nor deny without the confirmation.
Yeah, that's not exactly what we did. Yeah.
That is great. I do appreciate that our mind goes to the exact same place. That you're like, I'm going to do this. This is ridiculous. Yeah. Well done. I think for me, like Spain, for example, or Spain and Portugal for me, because I spent about 2 years in Portugal, and I'm not against moving back. I think the driving really hits home for me for living in Toronto. Like everywhere that I had to go, I like when I visited or when I lived there was at least half an hour. Toronto was a little bit better because I could walk to nearby shops and there was a metro, but still, like to see my friends who lived around like the Golden Horseshoe area, Niagara Falls, like I'm driving upwards to like an hour to see everybody, an hour to see my family. And like in Barcelona, for example, everything is very accessible either by bike or by metro or like a quick taxi ride. Like everything is just easier. And not to mention, like the UK obviously has better weather, but Ontario in the winter is abject misery. Like it's 6 months of kind of inside. There's not so many winter activities. Like Quebec really seems to embrace how cold it is there, and everyone's out like fairly often. Whereas Ontario, that's not the case. People are kind of hibernating. People that have kids maybe go out more often to toboggan and do these things, but you're kind of just waiting for May to hit. And so I think that was a real like I was back for the first time since COVID started this winter, and we talked about it, and I was just not moving as much. Like I wasn't biking, I wasn't running, I wasn't walking. I was kind of just inside eating cookies and then driving to friends' houses who would provide me with a charcuterie board, and I gained like 10 pounds in 3 months. Like it was unbelievable. And so like the lifestyle is not to be like, I think most people, when we say lifestyle, I think the people from home, they probably think of like, oh, they just want to be in sunshine, and like, yeah, there's part of it. And like to be closer to the beach, obviously there's a lot of joy in that, but the amount of life that are in these cities in Lisbon, in Southern Europe, and I'm talking life from people that are 16 years old to 80 years old. Like, because of the weather, like you can play paddle, you can go for a swim, you can bike, like you can do all these things, and the weather invites you out of your house to do more things. It's the catalyst for everything else. I think that's a important part that like it took me a long time to learn, and it's still today. Like who knows, if I have to move back to Canada, I will, and I'll find a way to enjoy it, aka vacation more often. But I think it's hard to understate like how different these worlds are. I often told people like I feel like Spain, or when I lived in Lisbon, like I feel like these places are like my personal Narnia. Like I get on an airplane, I go there, and I enter this world and this lifestyle that like is completely different as far as I'm concerned from living to the place that I was until I was 30. Like, have you ever had any similar experiences?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's always a shock every time you kind of go to the US and you see the kind of sprawl and how much you're reliant on a car and stuff. And I think especially, I think for us as well, our friendship group from university that moved to London, and it's such a big city that, in the end you would be on a train on the underground for an hour to go and see your friend for an evening. And so it just completely changes the dynamic, because, you know, here you're like, hey, let's go for a beer. And the odds are you're like a 20 to 30 minute walk away, which I love to walk everywhere. So I'm kind of happy to do that. For other people, it's like a 5-minute Uber. You know, the Ubers are very affordable. It's kind of, it's just a very different dynamic the way you live your life here. And it just opens up so many more possibilities, because it's so much easier here to go and like meet with people and stuff like that. And so that just makes a huge difference.
Amazing. And are you planning, like, are you taking it like 1 year at a time, or do you think like, no, like this seems like, obviously who knows what the future brings, but your mindset now, do you feel like that could be like your forever place, and you'll build a life around Portugal, or do you just kind of see where it takes you?
Yeah, I think when we first moved here, we were thinking, see where this takes us. But I think now we're pretty content to stay here. I think our thought is, you know, community is very important to us. And so I think that at this stage, you know, we've built a strong community here. So it would be a shame to now up sticks and move somewhere else and have to kind of start from scratch again. I think it's just, I think we're just kind of building those strong connections here. And Lisbon, the good thing with Lisbon, which I think is maybe different to some other places like Bali and so on, is that it's people that move here are generally stay here for years and years and years, or for life. So people are making this, their forever home, if you like.
Right.
And so that makes a big difference, because you're like, well, I want to hang out with this person. I want to see them, because the odds are I'll be hanging out with them 10 years from now. So we should probably build a pretty good friendship over the next 10 years, you know? So I think, for us, we see ourselves as continuing to live here long into the future. And, you know, you never know what comes in the future. You know, family members get old, et cetera, there might be some responsibilities, but as far into the future as we can see right now, I don't see any reason for us to move.
That's great. Yeah, and that's a nice segue to like talking about meeting people in different countries. I know. So my experience is when I came to Barcelona for 6 months or 1 year, 1 full year, many years ago. I remember I was on my own, and there was no when you guys came and visited me. I think in October, I just moved there in August, and like I was still struggling to meet people. So I remember when I first arrived, I was pretty happy. Like I found a pretty cool place. I had to live with a French guy who him and his buddies used to continually do cocaine and MDMA, and would go out at like random hours of the night and come home like screaming. I don't know what was happening.
Sounds like perfect housemates.
Yeah, like I ended up living with him because he said his flatmate had broken his leg and moved back to France, and he was leaving in November. So if I lived with him for 2 or 3 months, then when he left, I would take over the flat. So I was like, I can do that. This place is amazing. The location's great. I can do that. But there were even moments where like he had the master bedroom. One of his friends stayed over after another night out. And what I did not know is that his friend has some sort of health situation where he has like these terrified, panicked dreams in the middle of the night. And so it was like 5 a.m. one night, and all of a sudden from the next bedroom, it sounds like someone's being brutally murdered, because this guy just starts screaming. And so like I opened my door, like terrified and ready to defend myself. And all of a sudden I hear them start like cackling, laughing. And then I'm like, and then I go in the room, I go, guys, what the fuck is going on here? And they're like, we're so sorry. Like, and then they explained it. I'm like, okay. Nope. So November you move out? Cool. Yeah. Good night, guys. Good night, guys. And he was a great dude as well. We got along quite well. But like during those months, I remember being very specific. Like, okay, every week I need to go to 1 or 2 marketing meetups or networking meetups or intercambio to learn languages. And my goal would just to be to meet one person there that I could, sustain hanging out with. And from there, I built like this big group of people that I liked, and slowly you find out who you want to continue hanging out with and who maybe not. So I did a bit of a curation, but it takes so much time. Like, where have you found the best routes to meet people that are like not more stay weather friends, that are just like people that perhaps could be friends in 10 years?
Yeah, and it is refreshing to hear you say that you found it difficult, because we do this thing every time we go to one of these like meetup events or like social drinks or whatever, and we're like, okay, be more Mike. how do we embody that? Because you're just such a friendly person that would just talk to everybody and anybody. So we always think like, yeah, how can I be more like Mike? So that is refreshing to hear that you find it challenging as well sometimes.
That's a nice compliment. Thank you. I appreciate that.
So I think, similar to you, when we moved to Lisbon, we didn't know anybody here. We only knew, I think you introduced us to Laura Gale, and I think that's pretty much it.
Right.
We knew one person.
And she's left.
And she's left now, yeah.
My bad.
Yeah. So it was just from, it was literally starting from nothing, basically. We just had absolutely no friends here. We didn't know, couldn't speak Portuguese. We didn't know anybody. And so, I do find those meetup events just incredibly awkward. I just think that it's just very, I don't know, you're just having the same kind of conversations again and again, and it's just very hard to break through that barrier of, you feel awkward. You're like, you're going in, you're interrupting different groups of people that are talking. You're not sure you'll fit in here. It's just this really awkward event. So I think I probably only went to maybe a handful of those. I think maybe my partner, Una, she made more of an effort and maybe went to about 10 or so. But it wasn't really the right avenue for us. I think the interesting thing is that sometimes there you can get people that like love going to those kind of things, and they're quite happy with sort of, I guess, kind of transient friendships of like people are kind of coming into the city and they're going, and they don't really mind that. But we were very set on, we want to be meeting people that are like here for a long, long time and no plans to move. And so, so one of the early, but it's amazing how like one thing will often kind of build on the other. So I think through Laura Gale, that you introduced us to, we went to this, she was like, oh, we're going to the park. And obviously, it was the summer and stuff. And we're like, we're going to the park. There's going to be some friends there. You should come. So we went to that, and we just started basically just chatting to everybody around us. And through that, we met, I guess, the next handful of people that we started to hang out with.
Great.
One of the guys in particular that I started chatting to my left was this guy, Sean. And then he introduced me to this entrepreneur, Darius. And through him, I then met a bigger network of entrepreneurs and stuff like that. So it's interesting how like sometimes one kind of key connection can just lead into building all these other new connections. But you just get into this habit of just saying yes to everything, because you're just like, I just need to go to all of these things.
For sure. I'm way more brutal about not doing those things now, even though like I wouldn't mind meeting some new people. But it's interesting, what you just said made me think that if you move to a city and maybe maybe you're a doctor or an accountant or like you move to work into a company, those people probably find immediate friends in their workplace, right? You're essentially on the front lines of whatever business you're working, and there's a camaraderie that's built in. Whereas if you're an entrepreneur and you're kind of working from home, you have to make more of an effort to go to like a co-working spot, or which I don't really want to do that. Just go to more events to meet entrepreneurs, and it's a little bit more difficult, but I think maybe you can meet people that perhaps could be more lifelong friends, because they're in a similar journey to you. There's more shared interest from the start, and I think they're maybe more open to connecting. Like we've discussed this. We've seen some issues in entrepreneurship where like you find or entrepreneurs where you find like, okay, like that person's like more fringe, or they're more, crypto bro. For lack of a better term, like any of these things, there's better or worse avatars in these communities. But like, if you walk into a group and all of a sudden you hear someone say like, "No, man, it's the future," you're like, "I'm getting out of here. I'm getting out of here."
Doing a 180.
Yeah, 180. The funny part is like, I will talk to a lot of people when I enter those networking scenarios, but I can also be pretty discerning because I've been to a lot of them, and I don't know if I'm right or not, but I kind of make a lot of quick judgment calls. Like even I've done a lot of like improv classes and stuff like that. And the famous thing about improv is that like you'll always meet like incredible, amazing people in these classes, but there's always a couple nutcases that are there that you kind of have to be wary of, but they show themselves quite quickly. So even in that, I would go to like the Internations events in Barcelona and in Lisbon. And the way for me to pick out people that I wanted to hang out with is because a lot of these events, there are a lot of like older and a little bit awkward people that are there that enjoy going to these things. Like I kind of go for a purpose. I don't like really enjoy them that much. But if I can kind of scan a room and I can find other people who look uncomfortable to be there, I'm like, okay, I'm going to talk to them because we might have more in common to talk about. And it's worked out like a lot of times where I'd go around like collecting the people who felt like I got to get the fuck out of here, and I'd be like, "You guys want to get the fuck out of here?" and then we would go and get a drink somewhere and just have like a great time. So it's like, there's a bit of snobbery in that, but it's it served me well so far.
That's funny. Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, you have to you got to develop some skills going to those things, and like I think one of them is like bouncing from conversations really quickly and effectively, right? Because
right.
I think that's the problem that Una has when she goes to them, is like she's just too polite, so she won't like leave a conversation that she was done with like half an hour ago. And sometimes I'll look over and like, I just need to go and rescue her somehow because I can tell that she's having an awful time. But yeah, I mean, I remember a friend just like very sort of, I think liberally using the like, "Oh, I'm going to go get a drink. I'll see you in a minute." Or, "I'm off the toilet. I'll see you in a minute." Like just kind of anything that'll just like, just like any excuse to kind of circulate around without being rude, But yeah, I don't know. There's probably some, I like your technique of like, you're like circling around the outskirts, picking up the people that are not chatting to anyone. That's funny.
oh man. Yeah, because they can't really be like that, where you're like, I need to get out of here. And I definitely get stuck in conversations that halfway through my brain has left my body and I'm not really even sure what I'm talking about anymore. Like my brain just knows that if they're smiling, I'm like, yeah, it's time to go. Like, what's the famous one I heard somebody say once? Like, we were talking and they're like, "Okay, man, I'm going to let you go. I need to go." And like, they were doing me a favor. And I was like, genius. This person is a genius. I'm taking this with me for the rest of my life. And I'm going to use it. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to let you go. Yeah, instead of like, I'm going to run out of here because your story about your dog is killing the life in me. But I think that's been the hardest part, because I think when you started traveling as an entrepreneur, I think with me as well, we were like the first wave of like the post Tim Ferriss sort of movements because that book is a little bit silly, but for its time, it really was revolutionary, where I think it spoke to me where it said, like, I don't want to wait to retire. I want to travel now. I want to live my life now. I don't want to do what my parents and grandparents did, that once they started working, all they could think of was when they could retire and live their lives. Like, a lot of us were like, Jesus, that sounds horrific. And so that's what that book really meant to me. That, like, I remember being 28, maybe 29, and reading it and thinking like, oh my God, I'm not alone. Like there are people out there that have this dread of consistent, stable employment as much as I do. And so, like I said, we were the first wave that seemed to be able to do this traveling, and there was no like there weren't dating apps, there weren't Airbnbs, like there weren't these communities that we kind of had to like foster them on our own. And you know, like it was pretty tough, I think, for where now, like, you could find accommodations, you could find people, you could find all these things that I think it makes it a lot easier. Have you experienced that as well?
Yeah, for sure. It's a lot more, it's a much more heavier trodden path now. It's a lot more common. Like you say, when that book first came out, the idea was quite new. Not as many people were doing it, certainly. Right.
Well, everybody thought I was nuts, like including me. Like Canada, I don't know how the UK is, but Canada has what we consider like tall poppy syndrome, right? Like poppies all grow at the same height. If there's someone's growing too high, like they get cut. And like I know everybody thought I was nuts. Like one of my first business ideas that failed was like a shoe site for women, right? Like my only thing was like, this is how basic it was. Who buys everything online? Women. What do they buy? Shoes. Well, I should probably make a site about women's shoes. Duh.
Market research done.
Yeah, done. Didn't read anything. Didn't think of it. And also, like we said, well, this should be easy.
Yeah.
And like it was called heartmyshoes.com, and like I had this big elaborate idea behind it. I think I told you a lot of this, and it cost me a bunch of money to build, like money I almost didn't have. And if I knew then what I knew now, I probably could have turned it into something a lot more successful. Like I got a couple sales, but I kind of just ran out of money, and I had to pivot and try another business idea. Like, and I even hired an agency in Toronto that I could have hired someone in Poland, and it would have cost me a quarter of the price. But I had no idea how to do these things. But like, just reading these books really gave me the impetus of like, let's go and do it. And then, you know, my friends, because I asked my friends, girlfriends, their wives, every woman I ever knew in my life, that to take a photo of their shoes and upload it and create their own account. Like, I'm sure everyone thought I had a foot fetish. Like, like without a doubt. And they thought I was nuts, but I kind of kept like learning through failing and spending honestly way too much money on these projects. So to the point that when I was living in Barcelona, like 5 or 6 years later, a friend from high school who like knew I went through this journey, but we kind of lost touch. We had met up for dinner because he was in town for some sort of conference, and he's like, "Oh, so like, are you teaching English here? Like, what are you doing here?" And like, I totally realized like, oh my God, like he has no idea what's going on. And I explained like, you know, going through the e-commerce journey, like selling a company, going through this, like all these adventures, and he just couldn't believe it because like again, in Canada, if you're doing something different, unless you can show that you've been successful to do it and prove it, like you're just a weirdo. Like maybe it's more acceptable now because like entrepreneurship and doing your own thing has been kind of galvanized to the front of what is acceptable, and it provides this lifestyle in some cases. But back then, honestly, I think everyone thought at one point I'd be institutionalized.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's very true what you're saying, that these things are a lot more accessible now. And I think the big thing with moving to certainly somewhere like Lisbon and Barcelona is, like you say, there's just a lot of people in the same boat as you. So it's just very conducive to, you know, I'm sure hundreds of people arrive here every week in that exact same situation of, I don't know anybody here, I need to meet people here. And so it just makes it's amazing for how much that forces you to like connect with people and push yourself to do stuff with them. I think the other breakthrough for us here in Portugal was definitely taking up paddle tennis. Like now when we look up, like when we're in a room with our friends, and we're like probably met 60% of them through the paddle tennis, basically.
Wow.
And so, yeah, it's just a very, sports is just an amazing way to meet people, whether it's tennis, paddle tennis, football, whatever you're into. But yeah, it's just, there's this kind of social element to it of, okay, we'll play some sports together, then we'll have a beer. It's like a lot less of a stressful social situation because you're actually just doing something fun together,
right?
And having a drink afterwards, and you've got kind of something already built in that you're catching up about.
Right.
So yeah.
Actually, in that, I think that's reminding me of a really great point, because you're meeting people through paddle and not just like these entrepreneurial events. I think it is so crucial to have a group of friends that also are not entrepreneurs.
Sure.
Like I met a bunch of like some of my best friends here through improv, and they just, one person works for Google, another works for a data company, and like another person just does like more advertising sort of stuff. But like I wouldn't have met them otherwise if I was just going to like these different meetup events for e-commerce and things like that, because I learned sometimes a lot of entrepreneurs just continually talk about business. Like there are people I have friends with that anytime we get together, like they would just go on and on about marketing, and I wanted to off myself.
Yeah.
Because like that's all I really think about in my life when I was running those e-commerce companies, and I'm kind of sick of it. Like I think that's another thing that made me gravitate more towards like you and some of the guys that I met on that trip, because you are always up for a joke. You're always up for something that's like really silly and totally detached from business. And I'm like, yes, like this is kind of what this is what means to be a friend to me. Not like we go sailing for something, and then while we're on the boat, someone's asking about email open rates.
Yeah.
And you're like, Jesus, just for a minute, calm down.
So what was your sales copy?
Yeah, right. Time and a place, guy. Read the room. Come on.
Do you recommend MailChimp?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Whereas, like, because I think like there seems to be a good like ebb and flow with a lot of people that aren't so absorbed in it. You know what I mean? We'll talk about business for a few hours because obviously it's a huge interest of ours and things that we can go back and forth about. But then like there's a Simpsons joke that needs time and the floor. And like we can't deny it, but
yeah,
that's great. But anyhow, I want to be respectful of your time. It's been an hour, and this has been even greater than I've expected. So I do really appreciate you taking the time to do this no name podcast, or like it has a name, but it's kind of no name at this point.
Any excuse to just have a chat for an hour, I'm always down.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm going to let you go, and again, thanks for taking the time, man. I appreciate it.
No worries. Thank you.
All right, buddy. Ciao.
So thanks for listening to No More, No Less. I appreciate the time you spent with me today. So please subscribe and rate the show if you enjoyed it. It'll help me create more amazing content and get that next little bit of validation that I so deeply crave. If you didn't enjoy it, well, that sucks. But to make sure, I think you should listen to my next 10 episodes and then decide. I mean, come on. Rome was not built in a day. I'm just getting warmed up here, guys. So thanks again. See you next time. Bye.